much for joining us today on our next episode of the Hormone Café. Today we're going to talk about nutrition specifically with regards to PCOS. And I'm super excited because I have our dietitian here. Her name's Callie. She's a registered dietitian and she specializes in women's health, and she also specializes in diabetes and blood sugar management. So she's the perfect person to talk to us about this topic. Things that we want to go over are nutrition essentials for PCOS, eating for insulin resistance, what a low carb and low sugar diet actually means, and then some weight loss tips for PCOS. So I'm sure people ask you this all the time, like, okay, I've now been diagnosed with PCOS. What exactly do I eat? What would you say are some of the kind of essentials or the skeleton outlined?
Awesome. So thank you so much for having me. So really nutrition essentials is really having that balanced plate, and that can be really wide. So what does that exactly mean? So when we're looking at a balanced plate, we really first want to make sure that at least half of that plate is filled with veggies. And I am all about color. Add those veggies in, do an array of different veggies, just add them all in. So that's kind of one of the first components. The second component is protein. Protein is really important because what protein is going to come in and do is really bind to that carbohydrate and slow the breakdown of that carb in the gut. The other piece is really focusing on slow carbs, or those high fiber carbs. So things like oats and quinoa and brown rice and wild rice, beans and lentils. And then we also want to focus on healthy fats. So you don't want to forget that healthy fat, because what happens is our brains are primarily made of fat, and healthy fats really help hit that sensor in our brain to tell us that we're full and satisfied. So again, when we're looking at how we built this plate, I really like saying, okay, half that plate, let's fill with veggies. About a quarter of that plate, let's fill with protein. And again, more variety is going to be better off because there's different nutrients and different minerals and vitamins that you get from all types of foods. And then we'll focus in on those high fiber carbohydrates, about another quarter of your plate. And then don't forget to add at least 1 or 2 tablespoons of a healthy fat. So that can be 1 tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, half the avocado, some seeds, some nuts, etc.
I love that. So you can eat carbs.
Yes.
I feel like we talk about this a lot because sometimes when you Google it, they say, oh, be on a low carb, low sugar diet. And we'll get to that more, but I think that's a huge point of like making sure those are actually in there as part of a balanced plate. What about breakfast? How do you get vegetables for breakfast?
Yeah.
Because I get asked this a lot.
Yeah, that's a great question. So really where I'm guiding my patients is breakfast is a really important meal to start out with it. So please don't skip it. That's number 1. And 2, breakfast is an easy way. If you're doing eggs, you can always mix in some spinach, some bell peppers, some onions. I really like any way that you can get veggies. Sometimes, like if I'm not having a full veggie meal, sometimes I just add a little veggies on the side. Veggies can be a little bit more challenging, as we know, in breakfast, because if you're not eating an egg or something more savory, it might be a little bit hard to go, okay, how do I add this in if I'm having like a protein pancake, Callie? Guess what? You can literally mix spinach into everything. And that's what I recommend. If I am making like a high protein muffin or high protein pancake, I'm actually putting veggies in there. So whether it's spinach, zucchini, kale, I'm just throwing it in there and mixing it up. And honestly, you usually can't taste it.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have then just put it in things like pancakes.
Yep.
I love that. So when we think about PCOS, of course, there's different types of PCOS. Not everybody's insulin resistant, but it is a big component of it, like your blood sugar and insulin resistance. And I know you do a lot of blood sugar regulation. Tell us about, if you do have insulin resistance, how do you eat for that, and can you heal it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So eating for insulin resistance, we kind of want to go back to the basics of really making sure that you're getting that balanced plate. But what I want to really focus in on here is how and when you're eating your different foods. So it's really important to eat your veggies and your protein first as much as possible before you have those carbs in there. Because a lot of times, now if you have a mixed meal, obviously do your best. But a lot of times what can happen is when you get that high fiber from that veggies and that protein on board, before you add any of those high fiber carbs in, you can really help balance that insulin or those blood sugars. So you're going to get that nice even wave-like line instead of that big roller coaster ride. Sorry, you might have to tell me what else you asked me.
How about insulin resistance? Like, how do you keep your glucose flat?
Yeah. So obviously food is really important, but some other components outside of just eating for insulin resistance is making sure that you're hydrated. Hydration is a huge component of really helping keep those blood sugars stable. So like Dr. P likes to do, really making sure, and I'm the same, putting you on a continuous glucose meter to see how food is affecting those blood sugars. Hydration and movement are huge components of really keeping those blood sugars on the lower side. So adding, okay, I totally went off on a tangent.
It's fine. You can.
Okay, let's re-go to what we were talking about. So, we might need to cut out that whole part. Sorry about that. Okay. So going back to kind of more of the food piece of it. So always making sure that you pair that protein with those high fiber carbohydrates. That is really what's going to keep those blood sugars to stay stable so that we're not having that blood sugar roller coaster all day long. As soon as we have that blood sugar start to spike, that's when the insulin starts to secrete from the pancreas. So we really want to make sure that no matter what, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and your snacks, that you really have that protein on first. And then that you're really eating consistent meals. I have so many of my patients that are like, Callie, I'm too busy in the morning. I just can't fit it in. Or I'm going, all of a sudden 7 hours without having anything. That can be so detrimental on what your blood sugars are doing and really cause your body to have more of that insulin resistance. Or I like to just simplify it and say that blood sugar roller coaster ride, which therefore causes more of that insulin resistance. And then movement after meals. You guys, I cannot tell you the power of movement. So I had a client the other day that basically told me, you know what, I really just don't want to change anything about my diet right now. It's just too stressful. So I said, okay, let's just come to an agreement. How about you move for 10 minutes after every meal? And they were shocked at the results that they got by just moving for 5 to 10 minutes after every meal. So it doesn't have to be this huge workout routine or anything like that. It can just be the power of getting up, doing some light chores, taking a walk to your mailbox, walking around the block if it's cold outside, even marching in place, etc. That can really get those muscles contracting and help you start uptaking and utilizing that glucose that's from kind of flowing around in your body from all of your food. So movement can be really important. And then I don't want to forget fiber. I know we talked about some high fiber carbs, but specifically, I really want to encourage that you really actually start looking at how much fiber you're getting in per meal. So whether you want to document that on MyFitnessPal, kind of go through, okay, these are kind of the high fiber carbs that I add throughout the day, and looking at least getting 5 to 7 grams of that high fiber in with each meal and a little bit in with snack as well. That'll really help slow those blood sugars from doing those blood sugar spikes and causing more insulin resistance.
That's amazing. The movement part is so true.
Yeah.
I wore a continuous glucose monitor when I went to Disney World.
Fun.
Which was probably not a bad idea because I was eating so bad. Yeah. But you're at Disney World to eat popcorn and mushrooms. But my blood sugar was surprisingly stable. I was shocked because I was walking around so much.
Yeah.
And it just turned me on to, Sarah, it's real. You do have to move. Like, movement is so important. Like, I could eat a churro, and as long as I was walking, it actually didn't spike my blood sugar.
Yeah. It doesn't mean we're encouraging by any means, but everything can fit in there, not, if you're having it occasionally 100%.
Yeah, not that it's good to eat that. It just kind of shows you, like, the power of movement. It was so transformative to me to see that data. It was so cool. So I feel like we talked about this earlier, but when you kind of Google PCOS diet, they say, oh, just be low carb and low sugar. And a lot of people hear this from their PCP and things like that. What does that actually mean?
Yeah. So I first just kind of want to clear the air. It is not ketogenic. We do not want you to have no carbs. Those high fiber carbs are really, really important, especially for hormone balance. So we don't want you to just clear out carbs, but it is important to go back to look at that fiber piece and really go, okay, does the item that I'm eating, like brown rice and oats and quinoa and beans and lentils, does it have some fiber content to it? So those are going to be important. I typically, don't like to give really specific recommendations. I like you to talk to your practitioner or your dietitian to get really those specific macronutrient breakdown, which is definitely something we can talk about. But I usually recommend for, staying around 30 grams of high fiber carbs in each of your meals. But again, if you haven't hooked up to a CGM, it's really important to do that because that can really enlighten and open this whole new world of how does my body break this down? So we don't want you to focus on no carb. We want to make sure you're getting some carb in, focusing more on the high fiber and actually starting to pay attention to fiber. I think we always talk about fiber, but it's so loose because it's nothing that we hone in on, even when we're talking about macronutrients. We just talk about the main factors. But really, if you take time over this next couple weeks to actually look at how much fiber you're getting in, it's going to probably really change up those blood sugars. And then as far as low sugar, now obviously you're going to be getting some sugar from those higher fiber carb items, but you're also getting some vitamins and minerals. So apple is going to be a lot different than that tablespoon of honey that you're adding to your tea and coffee in the morning. I see this a lot where, patients will say, oh gosh, Callie, I'm just going to add this tablespoon of honey into my coffee, like no big deal. That's quick sugar, you guys. If you have a CGM on and you don't have any protein on board, especially, you're going to see those blood sugars just skyrocket. So it is important when you're choosing low sugar and lower carb, it is important that you're looking at the types. I can say that's most beneficial. Doesn't mean, like we just said, that you can't ever have a churro, you can't ever have honey, but I would rather you be getting majority of your carbs from your fruit, maybe even a sweet potato with skin on it, because that skin is that fiber piece, specifically the brown rice, the wild rice. Ancient grains are a great one. So looking, do they have ancient grains? So a good rule of thumb is to make sure that when you're looking at an item, does it have at least 2 to 3 grams of fiber per serving? That's really going to help regulate those blood sugars. So again, we don't necessarily want you to go super low carb we don't expect you never have sugar again, but it's really making sure where you're getting them from is the important piece.
I love that, looking at fiber. It's so good too for your digestion, your large intestinal microbiome. Yeah, it's true because I would have never have thought to look at fiber. It's exactly what you think of as your top macro. So it's perfect. And then of course, everybody has a different PCOS type. But when we think about PCOS, sometimes we think, okay, well, how do I lose weight if I have PCOS? Is that going to help me balance my hormones? What do you kind of tell those patients if their goal is to lose weight?
Yeah. So one is definitely making sure that you have protein with every meal. That is really going to be a huge satiation piece. And I know that Dr. Pederson and I say that a lot. But it's really important to have that protein on board. That's going to keep you satiated. That's going to keep your blood sugar stable, help you with your hormones. And that's really going to help your weight loss, because then you're not going to be trying to fill yourself with these empty fillers like all the carbohydrates or all the sugar when you have them on the board.
That makes sense.
So that's one huge piece, just specifically when we're talking about food. Another huge piece is movement. So trying to get in some strength training during your week is really going to help promote more of that weight loss, because if we have more muscle, we're going to be naturally helping our blood sugar stay more stable, less insulin resistance, all of that. So if you can get in 2 to 3 days of strength training, that is awesome. Any movement, though, in my world is beneficial. So even if you're like, oh gosh, I really can't fit this in right now, Callie, like how else can this be possible? maybe getting just a really slight low set of weights, having them in your office and trying to get up every hour to hour and a half and do 20 squats, do some arm. It doesn't have to be this big, huge thing necessarily going to gym. That's great if you have the time for that. But if you're not, the power of that frequency of movement is so important. And then, of course, when we're looking at nutrition, it is, like Dr. Pederson has mentioned in the past, it is a pillar. So it's not just about your food or your hydration. It's also important stress. So where is your stress at? Are you taking time all throughout your day to take those little steps back and just breathe? The power of breath is so important. And we kind of laugh at it because it sounds so funny to talk about just taking a pause and breathing, but it can be so powerful. So if you have a meeting and you're going right into a next meeting, just taking a minute or two to breathe can really help regulate those hormones and really actually long-term wise can decrease your stress or decrease that cortisol hormone, which then in turn will decrease weight.
Which totally makes sense, because if your cortisol is just so high all the time, your body's just in fight or flight, it's going to hold on to weight.
Yeah.
Instead of if you're nourishing yourself, then it'll know how to burn calories properly.
100%. And then probably the last thing is just hydration. I feel like we see it a lot out there and we hear all these recommendations, how much should you hydrate, all that. But hydration is such a powerful tool on being consistent with. Again, it can help really regulate blood sugars. It can help if your blood sugars are running high and you drink some water, it helps really dilute the system. So that can also help with that insulin sensitivity, insulin regulation, and overall weight loss.
Is there an amount you recommend every day?
Yeah, so I typically, depending on where you are, I like to meet you where you're at, but typically I like to at least start, nothing bare minimum is 64 ounces. I like to work, depending on what climate you're in, I like to work up to 80 ounces, but if we're not, say you're drinking 30 ounces, I'm not going to take you from 30 to 80 overnight. You will not like it because you'll be using the restroom all the time. So I like to take it a little bit slower, but the first goal is to at least get a minimum of 64 ounces.
I love that. It's nice to think, okay, if I can get there, it's a good goal for the day. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's so helpful. So things, in summary, we talked about nutrition essentials for PCOS, how you eat to help your insulin resistance, what a low carb, low sugar diet actually means, how do you get healthy carbs and not just be no carb at all, and then some weight loss tips in addition to eating, stress, hydration. So if you are a person who's struggling with PCOS or you're just struggling with hormone balance in general and you really need somebody to sit down with you, help you plan your meals, help you plan your grocery list, look at your macros, but most importantly, meet you where you are and make a plan that's practical for you, please schedule an appointment with Callie. She's extremely good at what she does and she can really help do something that is perfect just for your body. Thank you so much for joining us on the Hormone Café, and please join us on our next episode. We'll be all about fertility nutrition.